Welcome back to the shop, everyone. This week's video takes place in 2023, week 49 and 50. That's going to be December 4th through December 17th. And this is, of course, going to be the final video for 2023. So if you've been watching the videos this year, I hope you've enjoyed them. We're going to keep going into next year. And yeah, I'll have an update video in a few days. Just kind of talking about the car, the channel, some of the plans for the year. But yeah, I'd just like to thank you guys for all viewing this year. And now let's get into this video. So what I'm starting off with is some exhaust work. Well, starting off and finishing. I'm doing exhaust work in this video. I'm doing some fabrication, so I've kind of gone through some of that stuff before, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But I'm going to start by figuring out some hardware for the header flange to the headers. And I kind of messed this up. I didn't need to grab hardware out of my bins. The headers came with studs that I end up using. So I don't know what the thread pitch on the studs is, but I'm pretty sure they're metric. Actually, I know they're metric. So I eventually dig through my box parts and make sure I have all the right hardware before I jump under the car. Alright, now that we're under the car, I'm just, checking to make sure that these will thread in. Of course, there's coating on the nuts and the headers, so it's a little bit tight, but it fits. It's going to go in, no problem at all. So you can see there, I grabbed a 19mm wrench for the nuts, and I'm going to use the double nutting method in order to get these tightened down. And before I do that, I'm going to throw a little bit of copper coat, copper anti-seize on all of the threads, because if I ever need to pull these out without anti-seize, it's probably going to be a huge pain in the ass. So double nut these and thread them down. Do the same thing on both sides. So with the studs installed, I throw the flange over and I realize that the flange is way too big. So that's a 3-inch ball flange when I actually needed 2.5. So I kind of show you there that, that flange is just not going to fit. It goes all the way over the ball right to the header and it would not seal. So that sucks. But since that's a 3-inch pipe, the flare on the header ends up being more than 3-inch. So what I can do is I just marked around the flange on the header side of the flange, and I'm just going to cut this down. It's not the best thing in the world. Ideally, I would rather have 2.5-inch ball flanges to 3-inch, but that's kind of a oddball thing, so I'd have to do a bunch of work to try and make the 2.5-inch ball flange fit a 3-inch tube. And you know, the reality is I probably could just switch this down to a 2.5-inch exhaust, but I've already got the 3-inch kits. I've got all the flanges, so I'm just going to make this work. So cut that off and then do some test fitting, and it's still a little bit too large. So take it over to the bench, grind it down more, and we're just going to make it fit. So now with all of that grinding and cutting, the flange is no longer bottoming out on the header. It's still close, but it's... I hope it'll seal. I might have to throw a little bit of exhaust silicone in there just to, you know, make a full seal, but we'll see once this is running. Alright, so now that the flange is on, I'm going to start mocking up where I want this pipe. So, this is going to be full custom exhaust. I could have bought a kit, but I didn't want to. I enjoy fabrication. I wanted to just do it myself. Maybe I just enjoy pain. I don't know. But I'm going to throw the pipe up there, or sorry, throw the muffler on a couple of jack stands, just get it loosely in place. And then this will give me a ballpark as to where I can put this main pipe coming off of the header. One thing that I'm trying to do as I go through this is make sure that the muffler's not too low, so it's not going to drag on speed bumps and stuff, but also keep it away from the fuel lines enough that it's not going to heat up the fuel lines or melt them or do anything crazy like that. And then I don't want it too close to the floor. It'll heat up the floor. So there's a lot of things that I'm taking into consideration while I'm mounting this. And as per usual, I am kind of procrastinating on this just because there's a lot of like, should I do this? Should I do this? What should I do? How do I want this? Etc. etc. So what I found is the pipe is not just a straight shot from the flange or the outlet of the header. So I'm trying to be a little bit smart about this and kind of use a protractor to figure out what angle I need on the pipe for it to line up with the inlet of the muffler. And then I kind of thought to myself, well, what I can do instead is, you know, if I'm going to try and be smart about this, is be a little bit smarter and get a laser level, or get my laser level out. And what I can do is I can set it up so that the laser level is on the middle of the flange and the middle of the muffler inlet. And then from there, I can use the protractor and use it to find the angle on the laser line, and that'll tell me what angle I need to cut the pipe at so that it comes off of the flange and then straight into the muffler. So I'm going to give you a bit of a close-up view of that. So I've got that laser level, so you can see it's right in the middle of the pipe on this side. It's right on the middle of the inlet of the muffler. And I can use the protractor to find out the angle, and I think it ends up being like 7 degrees thereabouts. So what I'm doing now is measuring from the bottom of the flange to the bottom of the muffler to see if there's a height difference, like maybe I need to angle it up as well. But all in all, it's going to be pretty straightforward, I think. So I'm just going to throw it up on the bench, cut it, and we'll continue fabricating. So after just holding this up in place with a few jack stands, this is actually pretty good so far. It's not great, and the pipe is actually hitting the floor. So that's where my main issue is right now, is I'm going to have to knock out a piece of that floor to make it so that the exhaust can go by, and then I can just weld up a piece and cover it. It won't be a big deal. So I'm just gonna kind of show you here real quick where exactly on the floor I'm gonna cut stuff out. But for some reason, before I start cutting the floor out and making that pipe right, I want to grab the 180 and, you know, just kind of make sure that it's going to fit over the axle. I think one of the things here, because I got to come out of the muffler, it's a very tight area in here, and then come up and over the axle. So I'm trying to make sure that I can actually do that and how it's all going to kind of work. Now that I figure out that's gonna kind of work, I'm just going underneath and I'm just marking on the floor where I need to cut out. And then what I'll do is I'll go back into the car and I'll put some of the fire retardant paper over all the wiring, because while I am cutting this out, I really don't want to be shooting sparks over any of the wiring. So let's just, you know, do the smart thing and protect it as best we can. Before I actually start cutting, what I'm doing is I'm taking a drill with a drill bit and I'm just putting a quick little hole in through the floor just to make sure that I am in the area that I think I am. That way, no, I don't have any surprises, right? The last thing I want to do is like, oh crap, I cut in the wrong area. I didn't think I was there. So now let's just cut that out. So as you can see right now, the pipe is hanging pretty low in the front. That jack stand's not infinitely adjustable, so I'm just grabbing some cardboard and throwing it under the jack stand just to get it lifted up and kind of in place. You know, it's a cheap solution that worked. I'm not really unhappy about it. And from here, I'm just kind of, you know, lining it up and making sure it all works. So this is pretty clearly a large gap on the top that I don't want. I mean, I could possibly try and fill that with weld, but I wouldn't want to. So I'm going to pull the pipe back out and just chop it down a little bit and get, you know, a bit of the right angle in there. And just like that, we have a gap that I am super happy with. It'll be super easy to weld, no problems at all. So now we can kind of get this more or less in place and tacked up. Alright, so with these few tacks, that'll easily hold up the entire weight of that pipe in the muffler. You know, I wouldn't really be able to bounce it or drive on it, but just for now, I could even pull the jack stands out from under the muffler and it'll hold it up, no problem. One thing I will need to do later is cut the entire length of the pipe down, because it's going into that muffler quite a bit more than it needs to, so by cutting it back, I'll gain a little bit of flexibility in the pipe and, you know, taking the muffler on and off. But all in all, I'm quite happy with that as it is, so I can start moving in towards the back and kind of figuring out where I'm going to mount this up and over the axle piece, and start figuring out the angles and kind of start figuring out how this is all going to work and go together. So my plan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little chunk of this quarter stock, cut it down a little bit, and then I'm going to weld it to the diff, and then I can use this to either clamp or use a magnet to hold the 180 that goes up and over the diff to this piece, so everything will be kind of lined up where I want it and held roughly solidly in place. So I start trying to clean off some of the primer from the diff with this sanding attachment, but it works for shit. So I eventually switch out to the grinder to actually, remove the paint. With that paint removed, I can kind of figure out where I want to place this and get the support in place and welded to the diff. So now I'm just using a magnet on that support to hold this up, and I can kind of play with it and move it a little bit. So now looking at this, I need to come out of the muffler, kind of at a 90, but the 90 that I have, it's, got way too much length on it, so I'm just going to cut this down a little bit. But using my chop saw isn't going to work because it's just everything's in the way. So switch over to the bench and I'll use the angle grinder, which I'm not super happy about because, I'm not great at making perfectly straight cuts, but such is life. You got to do what you got to do. So from here, I can easily come out of that muffler. The angles are pretty good, but coming into that over the diff part, I'm gonna need to put a fairly, what's the word I'm looking for? Fairly aggressive angle on the pipe going over the diff. And I know I'm not good at making angled cuts with the die grinder, and I don't have a bandsaw, or my chop saw is not gonna work for that piece. So I'm actually gonna pick up a different tool in order to allow me to do that a lot easier. But since I don't have that tool at this point, this is where we are going to leave this video. So that is all the time that we have for today. As always, if you stuck around this long, I'd like to thank you for viewing. We'll catch you in the next one.